Report fraud, working alongside the Online Crime Centre, the boots on the ground policing response, and the wrap around that being public-private partnership as the norm. I think we're starting to build a really world-leading system in the UK, and we're going to start to take that fight back to the fraudsters.
Hi, I am Arvind Narayan, Head of Preposition, Digital Identity and Fraud at LSEG Risk Intelligence. And today, we are going to be talking about fraud, which is the UK's biggest crime. Fraud is scaling. And in the UK, in 2025 alone, the fraud losses rose to £1.28 billion across 4 million cases. Trust is also shrinking due to that. The challenge now is whether the UK's response can move faster than the fraudsters. That's why today's conversation matters. And I'm delighted to be joined in the studio by Helena Wood, who is the Head of Economic Crime Strategy at City of London Police, the UK's national lead force for fraud. Welcome, Helena, to this conversation.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Report Fraud was launched this January, which was a fantastic launch. I was there for the public launch, and it is national reporting, triage, and intelligence sharing platform. The public will always ask the question, what is different this time and what happens after the reporting?
What I will start with saying is that this is a fundamentally different service to action fraud. Some key things have changed. The first being that this is really an end-to-end life cycle management approach to taking your reports and making them work in practice. So it starts with the reporting, it moves into crime analysis, and then that lifetime victim care. So we've really taken an end-to-end process, and that was really key to the design of the new service, kind of taking feedback for some of the challenges that we saw as City led action fraud over a period of about 10 years. Really, we're trying to make every report count, and that's very much the tagline of Report Fraud, as you saw at the launch. And the really fundamental to the design of that new service was victims. I know that sounds incredibly obvious, but some of the service design in the past was very siloed, not joined up, and it didn't start in that kind of cradle to grave sort of victim care approach. That's really, really different now. Victims are absolutely at the heart of the report fraud experience, and everything City of London Police does, I should also say. So two of those core design principles upon which report fraud were built relate to the victim experience, whether it's the UX at the front end, the user interface of the website, whether it's training call handlers in a sort of victim-centric and victim-friendly language so that victims really feel cared for throughout the entire process. So what are they going to see that's different? Well, the first thing I think is really important is that we keep victims updated through the whole journey. One of the previous criticisms that I think we had to engage with for report fraud was that in action fraud, it could feel like your report was going into a black hole. That's completely different now. Much like you can track your parcel if you're waiting things as we do in modern day life, with report fraud you can log in and see where your report is, what stage it's at, whether it's either just being triaged to go through to policing, whether it's with policing for a response, or whether it's gone out for some sort of action. Now, let's be honest, some of the action might not be your traditional criminal justice response, whether that's kind of arrest or prosecution. We all know, and you know at the sharp end at LSEG, dealing with some of the front end of this particular problem, that it's not always easy to get to some of the perpetrators, some of whom may be in jurisdictions where we simply have no law enforcement reach or partnership. But you might be updated on a website takedown or a referral to a social media company for to look at the risk on their platforms. It might be the takedown of a money muling account, for example. But the fundamental to all of it is that you as a victim will be updated through the whole process so you feel much more in control. Secondly, for me, and really importantly, is that we're able to offer much more up-to-date, bespoke advice to people on the front end. So whether you have been a victim of identity fraud, we can give you that protection advice instantly about how you then go and secure your identity, or whether you've had an account takeover, we can offer those really key bits of protection advice instantly to prevent re-victimisation. We all know that sadly, once you've fallen victim to fraud, you are more likely to be on some sort of list or be targeted again. And we need to fundamentally protect the public from that risk. So the service is really geared up, both through kind of personal advice through the call handling or through the website to deliver sort of more automated protection advice. And then finally, I think that the really, really important bit of the new reports fraud service is, we know that sometimes a victim report doesn't quite offer the level of detail to enable law enforcement to take that immediate action. Sometimes the victim actually doesn't have enough intelligence to give us to actually act immediately. However, that intelligence is retained, and in the future, if your report leads to, for example, putting together another victim report, and that we then have a much broader picture of that threat, and we can then reopen the case and find a more traditional law enforcement outcome, the victim will be informed, whether that's a month away, 6 months away, or even a couple of years away. You as a victim will be informed when your piece of intelligence has been put together in a bigger picture to lead to a law enforcement outcome. And I think that's really why we use the tagline, every report counts, because this system can really bring that kind of networked picture of intelligence that allows us to take action in a way that previously we weren't able to.
Those sort of three key pillars really resonate with where this is going. Fraud acting as a trust layer essentially really changes the way victims are reporting today. And how do you see, Helena, in terms of the outcomes that you wish to see in the next 12 months of report fraud since its launch?
Yeah, I've talked about the victim-centric design, and that's absolutely core. But one of the other core principles on which report fraud was designed is getting the data in the right place. I don't need to talk to you guys about the use of data to protect fraud. It's absolutely fundamental. So getting the right data in the right place with the right tooling, importantly, to make best use of that victim reporting, is a really golden source of intelligence. The report fraud service is underpinned for the first time in UK policing by a really advanced data analytics engine that you'll be familiar with in your world, Av. It's less familiar in policing, but I'm very pleased to say we have entered the 21st century. And the whole system is underpinned by this system that will allow us to maximise the use of that data and draw those links between cases and surface them much more quickly than we were previously able to. And what do we want out of that? Well, more actionable intelligence going out to our partners in law enforcement, instead of taking a number of weeks to piece together the picture through, really, really well-trained analysts, but without the tooling, they weren't able to surface the intelligence they needed quickly. We now can move from weeks into days, even into, some instances, hours, to get that really, really crisp intelligence package out to policing. And we know timing is really key in fraud. If we miss that golden sort of 48 hours, sometimes it's too late. But now we're able to surface that intelligence much more quickly and drive much better operational chances of outcomes, at least. Not always possible, but where we have the chance, we absolutely need to act on it. And then finally, I'd guess alongside that, the really key point I would like to raise about fraud is that this is just the start. We're only 6 months in. I'm not saying it was a minimum viable product that went out. It was absolutely a comprehensive service, but we have designed the service to have a continuous improvement model. We're going to take the feedback from our partners in policing and in the private sector, importantly, and from victims, and continue to build and layer. And the data analytics engine is built to sort of scale over time. So really exciting to have this now out there in the ether and kind of driving those benefits early on, 6 months in. But it will grow and scale.
This reporting system, but however, can only take us so far. How does policing need to improve to fight against this global fraud epidemic?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think we've got some of the fundamentals in place now. We've got the front end right for victims, and that will continue to scale and grow, as I've alluded to. But it can, as you suggest, only go so far. City of London Police is the national lead force for fraud and has been for the past 20 years. And while we hold report fraud, we hold some national investigation services and some key intelligence functions for the UK. And we couldn't coordinate across that policing landscape. But, over those 2 decades of experience, this has scaled, it's grown, it's now 45% of all crime in the UK. That's a huge number. 4 million incidents a year. This is really difficult to tackle, and I think policing and everyone in the ecosystem is aware we cannot arrest our way out of a problem of that magnitude. It simply outstrips the resources of even the best resource policing service. So I think for me, we really have to fundamentally rethink what outcomes we're trying to drive in policing. And that sort of turns it on its head. We tend to measure things in policing through arrests and prosecutions. I think we need to look at this threat completely differently. It's a very different challenge to the challenges we face in other areas of policing. So, for me, the outcome we really have to drive is public protection. At the end of the day, that's what policing is there to do. And in this particular crime, I think we can achieve that in a different way, because actually to protect the public, we simply need to drive down those numbers to an extent. The volume is simply too big to manage. But the way we do that is different to the way we would do that in other areas of policing, for example. A lot of the tools and techniques to tackle this threat sit completely outside of policing. They sit in the systems of the financial services sector, in the telecommunications sector, in the technology sector. They have the tooling available to kind of shut the front door on some of these threats, and we need to just prevent the scale getting to people in the first place. So if I have one takeaway from this conversation, is that the policing response to fraud has to be public-private by default, not by exception in the future. We just simply need to drive down those numbers. That said, could we do more? Of course we could, and we're really, really committed to kind of driving across the whole policing landscape, not only at City and London Police, but using our national lead force role to really improve and coordinate the response across policing. We do need more credible deterrence in the system. We need to have some more arrests and some more prosecutions, as difficult as that can sometimes feel. So we're absolutely committed to doing so. And as a national youth force, we do work across the 43 police forces in England and Wales to kind of push for, best practices, standards, and kind of work to cooperate and help those police forces be as good as they possibly can be with the resources available in the system so far. I do at some point think we need to ask ourselves the question, is 2% of UK policing enough to deal with 45% of all crime? I'll leave that somewhat as a rhetorical question, if I may, but it just shows, with the level of resourcing currently in the system, we simply have to operate as an ecosystem, as a whole of system response, and we are absolutely reliant on those partnerships with our partners in the financial services sector particularly, but also increasingly the work we're doing with the telco sector and some of the big tech firms to drive down the volume. And report fraud, if we circle back to that, allows us those starting points to share that data out through trusted flagger programs with our partners across the private sector to help them help the ecosystem kind of close the doors and drive down that volume.
That's fantastic, Helena. And I do want to talk about some of the statistics that we gathered as part of our After the Scam report, especially in Europe, Middle East and Africa. And it's interesting to see that UK adults are a lot more alert. About 70 to 80% are being attacked in the form of a scam or a fraud. However, only like 29% are actually fallen victim to the fraud, which means all the things that you mentioned with that small percentage of the task force is actually working because of public-private partnership to kind of push that message out to say, prevent, are you sure you're sending money to the right individual or entity, etc. And also the sorts of educational pieces coming to educate the consumers, the citizens and the residents are really working. That shows that 29% is absolutely a smaller number compared to what's happening in parts of Europe, for example, which is in some countries it's about 60% or more. So that was a really nice silver lining. Obviously, we can't rest on our laurels. There's a lot more work to do because fraud is scaling at a faster pace than ever. But it's interesting to see that stat.
Well, it's good to see some things working, and I think you'll be aware of the government Stop Think Fraud campaign,
yes.
In policing and again, to drive back to the new capabilities we have in report fraud, we're able to kind of surface some of those threats much more quickly and respond to them and work with established campaigns like Stop Think Fraud to push that messaging out to the public. And really pleased to see that's working. Policing is going to be doing a lot more of what we would call protect work. So, police officers can make arrests and prosecutions, but they can also offer protection advice on the ground, not only through report fraud, but really on the ground through UK police forces. I think you're going to see a lot more messaging coming out of policing, either on your doorstep or through the kind of comms campaigns. So comms is all in this. Can we put it all on the public to protect themselves from fraud? No, we can't. It's getting much more sophisticated. With AI, it's going to be increasingly difficult to spot. But being alert and being aware and building in that thinking time, just stopping, as the campaign says, stop, think fraud, it really does work. And I'm really heartened by the statistics that something is working. We just really need to kind of double down on that now.
It's interesting you say that, Helena, that the fraud typologies are shifting. We saw in our survey that we conducted in EMEA that 1 in 5 adults have already encountered AI-generated scam content. We are talking voice clones, deepfake images, AI chat posting as a bank to say, hey, can you transfer the money from X to Y? How do you see these systems start to shift and spot these trends earlier? The second part is how do we share that intelligence to public-private partnerships where telcos and others will be aware of this sort of trend is happening?
In terms of typologies, we're already seeing some of the benefits in report fraud that we are starting to surface those trends so much more quickly so we can get the messaging out at a sort of protect layer out to the public really, really quickly. But more tactically, we are able to use that report fraud system to push out some of those signals. It's designed to be able to push that over time in an automated fashion with some of our private sector partners, and we are kind of trialling and testing that to make this a much more automated and systematic response. But beyond report fraud, you'll have seen the fraud strategy launch, which I think you attended earlier this year. The government announced the online crime centre launch, which is now operational in its first year. We're working at City Police alongside partners in the NCA to really scale the online crime centre. And that is working hand in glove with report fraud. So how it works in practice is report fraud is starting to surface some of these trends much more quickly to get the broader protect messaging out to the public. The online crime centre is then leveraging those partnerships in the private sector to in really fast time design out some of those problems that we're seeing. So whether it's a new modus operandi of using kind of social media companies or use of cryptocurrency to kind of move funds faster or whatever platform we're using, OCC will take what we're seeing through the front door reporting of report fraud and then translate that into kind of quick time design out solutions across the private sector. And then taken as a whole, that kind of wrapper of, report fraud working alongside the online crime centre, the boots on the ground policing response, and the wrap around that being public-private partnership as the norm. I think we're starting to build a really world-leading system in the UK, and we're going to start to take that fight back to the fraudsters. So give us time. It will take time to scale, but I think we have the key pieces in place in the UK now to really start driving down the threat, and I'm really excited to see how that evolves over the next 12 months.
Well, we know fraudsters are effective across borders. I'd love to kind of get your views around cross-border data sharing, and do you see this intelligence within the UK being shared across borders in the future?
I think it is the real challenge in any financial crime space, that cross-border sharing, and I'm not sure, frankly, that we're there yet. I'm not sure we've got the nodes across the globe yet, but we are starting to see some really emerging global best practices. I think a number of people from City Police were at the Global Fraud Summit recently over in Vienna, where they were able to meet with partners across the globe to see what we can learn and bring back into the UK setting. We're seeing things like anti-scam centres being established particularly in the APAC region. They seem to be really taking a lead on the fraud response. So I'm always saying, look east, not west, if you want really good fraud responses at the moment. So learning from them, once we get those key nodes, the nodes in the system, we have report fraud and OCC in the UK. Once we have those anti-scam centre nodes, I think we can start talking about joining up and sharing cross-border. It won't be easy, but I am the eternal optimist. I don't think anything's impossible. The I guess comparison I would draw is, if you look at other national security threats, and I would absolutely say fraud is a national security threat. If you look at those, no one questions sharing cross-border for things like counter-terrorism purposes. Cybercrime is probably a closer analogy to draw. They have the networks built up. They've got the global infrastructure to enable that sharing. We're just not quite there with fraud. And that's just the law enforcement piece, which is much easier. Private sector sharing over borders is another matter. But I think we are starting to see some of the technologies emerge that will, over time, allow this to be done safely and securely, and importantly, with respect to people's individual privacy. So I know a lot is talked about in terms of privacy-enhancing technologies. Yeah. We're starting to see some of those benefits. I think we have to have some early first adopters who are going to dare to share across those borders and use those technologies. It is difficult. Civil liability is an issue. I respect that. But I think we have to have some early movers. And if anywhere's a good petri dish, and I would say this wouldn't I because I'm in the UK, but if anywhere's a good petri dish to try all those things, the UK is starting to take a real global lead in fraud responses. So I think we've got to start moving forward. You know, the UK government's really leading the charge on this international conversation. Where do we go next on international cooperation and coordination on fraud? That ultimately has to end in some sort of sharing across borders, but are we there yet? No. Will we get there? I don't doubt it, because it's such an emergency at the moment. We have to. There's no choice.
I absolutely agree. And I think there's a shift in terms of the framing, which is move from away from data sharing to intelligence sharing. It kind of automatically wraps the points you mentioned around like privacy enhancing technologies. You're not really sharing the data, but you're sharing the intelligence and the signals across border for other entities to act and help prevent this mass epidemics. Helena, thank you very much for that insight. And a reminder that if you need to report fraud or cybercrime to the police, go to reportfraud.police.uk. As we discussed, this is an issue that affects us all. If you want to hear more about LSEG Risk Intelligence Survey after the scam, or the other amazing work we do in this space, please visit the link below. Many thanks for watching, and goodbye.